Hello Gothic friend, and welcome to episode 5 of our mini-series with Tugce Kutlu on Midnight Mass. This last episode is the one that's going to close these wonderful talks with Tugce that I have such a fantastic time with her. And in this section of that we started this year with the road to self-recognition, in this episode we're going to talk about otherness and the supernatural. But we do a lot more than that. We do like an overall view of what we have learned together, how much we have enjoyed this journey, because it was going to start with one episode and it's ended up being 5. So we made a mini series, and we haven't just talked about the otherness and the supernatural all along. We've talked about the uncanny, we've had to mention Freud, we've talked about characters, we've talked about setting the story, the origin of the story, who's the monster, who's not the monster, the different characters, those that have a voice and those that don't have a voice. We've made differentiations between the ghosts or the monsters, the supernatural world, and the human beings, and where they actually cross over. So we have done a lot of detail and in-depth analysis. So because of how rich this was and how much a lot of people have enjoyed that, we are going to create, we're going to make accessible to you the presentations. So the presentations and some PDFs. So this is how it's going to go. So for those who are actually teachers and you are teaching horror in schools or in college, or you need this material for courses, we're going to give you the opportunity of downloading the presentations that are going to have more than what you have to see on the videos. They're going to have extra information and also PDFs with exercises that are going to complement these audiovisuals, these videos. So for those who are really a fan of what we have done here, you will have direct access. If you want to have that material, you have the link below in this video. When you finish, just go there, click, and have a look at what we have prepared for you. If you are just here because you you have enjoyed the journey with us, and you just want to have that information, it is a lot of learning material there that you can use as a basis to keep investigating about the Gothic, the elements of the Gothic, horror, grief, and everything that we talk about in the series. The series has just been an excuse for us to keep talking about everything that we love, which is grief, the supernatural, horror, and all the uncanny elements that surround us, and how much of ourselves, identity, we have learned from watching this series and analyzing this series together. So friends, this is the last episode. I hope you enjoy it. I hope that you leave your comments, that if you haven't subscribed, then subscribe, and follow us everywhere. Tugce is fantastic, a great communicator, and I hope that you really enjoy that. We hope that you really enjoy it, and let's start with the show. Good afternoon, evening, Tugce. How are you today?
I am fine. How are you, Alicia?
I'm okay. Welcome to Gothic Land once again, and welcome to our midnight sessions, part 5. How does that feel?
It feels amazing, to be honest, that we found so much to talk about this little show called Midnight Mass, and it's a privilege to be talking about it, to be honest. And I really enjoy all the points that we are making so far, and that we are finally finalizing our sessions on it. It's kind of like a goodbye as well. So saying goodbye to it, saying goodbye to Midnight Mass, and it's interesting. Let's see
It
what
is.
happens.
Yeah, because really, people, if they wait till the end and if they really want to keep talking about it, well, we were considering just having a day, a live event. So we're going to propose that and see if people get engaged and they want to talk to us, because then we can kind of continue a little bit more, but with more people. So let's see what happens. See what happens. But
Let's
yeah,
see.
today,
Yeah.
part 5. I've actually seen a lot more people talking about it since we've been doing this. I don't know if it's just coincidental, but yeah, I find that quite interesting. Like there are more things on internet now, and a lot of people keep, like, maybe because they keep watching it and there's more people with it.
Maybe it's garnering your attention more now, that
Hmm,
it's catching your attention more now that we're
probably,
talking about it.
it's popping up on my YouTube feed as well.
Yeah,
Like people
because when it first came out, everyone was talking about it. Like it was like wildfire,
talking.
and I was like, "What are they all talking about? I need to see this. Like, what is this thing they're all talking about?" So I started to show. Of course, I was going to watch it anyway because it's Mike Flanagan, and I'm a big fan. But because everyone was talking about it, I was interested more.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And then you see, it's like when you're pregnant, you see all the pregnant ladies, or when you want to have a baby, you keep seeing bellies.
Exactly.
So yes, it's
Exactly.
true. That is true. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about it. So yeah, it could be that. It could be that. Well, so there we go again. We are
Yay!
in this mini series, Talks with Tuche, about Midnight Mass. And we like these presentations so much that I just keep making them longer. So you see today, we'll have to go really quickly.
Perfect.
Before we go into details, before we go into these lessons, because really I'm watching this again to go over what we've done, not to cover the same things. And these are real lectures, to change. I think people need to realize that this content is what they will find at university level, and maybe not from my side, but from yours, definitely. So we ask for support. So people, if you're enjoying this content, and very soon I'm going to be uploading the presentations with extra content of these classes there. So some of it will be private for those who are really super fans of what we're doing here, and others, if you just want to come and donate, be very welcome, my friend, to Gothic coffee.com, Alice in Gothic Land 1402. Remember, Valentine's Day, and Gothic Valentine's Day for you to support us.
1402. That's great.
I don't know. These things are, this is like these synchronicities of the world, of the life and the universe. So tell us a bit about your experiences so far. We've got you really doing your thing. So people, believe me when I
Yeah.
you are
Thank
really
you.
entertaining. And this is great. I mean, I put little goatees on people's faces.
Yeah, that's I was looking at that. I was trying to understand what was happening in that picture, what was happening with people's faces. And yeah, I'm doing, as you know, I'm a research and teaching assistant at Ankara University, but I'm also doing, courses on, film history, elsewhere as well as the university. So it's a picture from when I was teaching them German expressionism and was talking a little bit about Soviet montage cinema and Eisenstein and Bertov and all those very important names. So that's that bit on the right is that course, and that bit on the left is my room at the university,
That's
basically.
great. You look really like well with it. Yeah, like I've settled here. I'm not moving.
Yeah, yeah. I'm vibing with that place. Look at that.
It's
With that
cool.
with
That's
that
great.
fancy green light and all that. It's like
It's
an Agatha Christie novel.
oh, it's amazing. No, I love it. I keep stealing your pictures to put them because I think people need to know, and people like to know what we're up to outside making videos and doing chats and talks. Is that people kind of like what is our lives outside all the horror and all the gothic, so a bit of reality here for them as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, your life is this, isn't it? Your life is research, is horror, is the gothic, is grief, it's and you take it to all the areas of your life, so this is
Yeah.
great.
Every scary thing that you do not like to talk about basically is my is my niche, is my obsession.
Yeah, but the thing is that you make a living out of it,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
somehow this is your path. So for those who believe that it's not possible to live of your passion, we have a good example that yes, you can. So there
Yes,
we
you can.
go. Brilliant. So are you ready for today's episode 5? So today we
Yes.
have Otherness and the supernatural,
Yeah,
and
they're not very far from one another, to be honest.
true. And you mentioned things from the otherness about the otherness the other day when we were talking about identity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were talking about how to expand this a little bit more. And maybe we could use this reference that you mentioned the other day. You talked about Edmund Husserl,
Yeah.
and you talk
And
about
Kant.
identity versus the other. And that's why I picked this picture again.
Again, because it perfectly sums up the entire conversation. Yeah, it's important that this picture should be in all of our courses. Basically, this is a perfect picture.
Yeah. So as always, this is what you said more or less. Correct me if I got it wrong.
Hmm.
But summarizing, when you were talking about identity and the otherness, you said that whereas identity is about the self, the other is the opposite of the self. I thought that was really clever. The
Hmm.
condition and quality of otherness, of being the other, is the same as being different from, and alien of a social identity of a person, of the identity of the self. I mean, it sounds like a mouthful, this, but yes. And then you extend it
Yes.
to, I suppose now you'll elaborate a little bit further, but you said also that otherness it identifies with the characteristics of who and what of the other, which are the same from the symbolic of the other, of things from the real aesthetic, political philosophy. I think I was just trying to copy what you were saying. So obviously it's a bit random from social
No,
norms. What
but
are the key words? And these are the social identity in the self, therefore the condition of otherness, and this is where we're going today, is a person's non-conformity within social norms of society. I think for me this is key. And I suppose this is what you're going to elaborate now. And that the otherness is a condition of this political exclusion, so we can't get away from politics,
hmm
affected by the state or by the social institutions placing the other in the margins of society. So you said all these the other day when we were talking about identity, and obviously you were talking about otherness because, as you said before, they go hand in hand. So what are your thoughts, or would you like to elaborate further on these now? Because Husserl, I'm not really familiarized with him.
of course.
So
Should I elaborate?
yes, please, yes, because
Of course. Of course. I thought you were going to say something. I was waiting for you to say something. Okay. I'm if I I no need to be sorry. I was just, is she going to say something? She looks like she's going to say something.
I think you can hear
But
my
yeah,
brain. You know me
truly.
so well now. You listen to my brain.
Oh my God. Okay, so the other is very important in my studies as well, because I'm now focused more, my PhD is more focused on the identity. So I'm reading a lot about, Kant and Husserl, those, and Lacan. Those are the names that deal with, the other. So what is the other? So the concept of the self uh, needs something opposite. So this is the existence of the constitutive other. So you can't exist without an other, basically. So so basically, to define the self, you need the other to be defined. So in the late 18th century, Hegel introduced the concept of the other as, as a part of the consciousness, which basically complements the propositions from the self-awareness. Uh, uh, so that's what started the whole conversation. Hegel started the whole conversation about the other. So Husserl took it to a next level, basically, and he applied the concept of the other as the basis for intersubjectivity, the psychological relations among people. So what he did is that he said that the other is constituted as an alter ego, as an other self. As such, the other person posed and was an epistemological problem of being only a perception of the consciousness of the self. So as you can see now, that first Hegel says that we need the other to identify as the self. So there comes Husserl and takes it to a next level and says that the other is constituted as our, alter ego. So these are two very different names, and they are talking about it. Then comes Jean-Paul Sartre, and he applies the dialectic of intersubjectivity to describe how the world is altered by the appearance of the other, of how the world then appears to be oriented to the other person and not to the self. The other appears as a psychological phenomenon in the course of a person's life and not as a radical threat to the existence of the self. In that mode, a lot of other, scientists and theorists talked about the other. One of them was Lacan, and he talked about, he and Levinas, they talked about and established contemporary definitions and usages of the other. And Lacan associated the other with language and with the symbolic order of things, and Levinas associate the other with the ethical metaphysics of scripture and tradition. The ethical proposition is that the other is superior and prior to the self. So he was about the religion and scripture and all. So who that reminds us of in the series?
That's a bit Beth, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a very apparent, and that's very obvious that we have a man of scripture in the show, basically, and he brings in the other from, basically, he goes to it was Jerusalem that started the story in that regard. He goes to the Middle East and takes the other and comes back to the United States, and that's very telling to me. That's very obvious, and you can say that in a sense, Riley is also an other, because he is away. He's far from home. When we begin the show, he has a car crash, and we see that, and he now is in prison, and we see that. And he comes back to the community, and everybody is looking at him, and everybody is like looking at him weirdly and talking behind his back. He is the other in that sense. in this regard, because he comes from outside, and everyone is now wary of what he might change in this community that is very close knit. And so the other is a threat in this sense, because the other is a vampire. The first one is a vampire, so he's a threat to the community and to the living beings on the island. And the second one, Riley, is a threat to the community because he does not believe in the sense that they do believe, and he doesn't go to church. He doesn't do the things that they do in, most of the series. And he's a threat to the society as well. But he must be there also, because otherwise the self is not formed without the existence of the other. So that is also important. We need Riley in the story to drive it forward. Oh, that's beautiful. Sheriff is also the other, because he was raised as a Muslim. So I think he was not raised as a Muslim. I think he says, I converted to Islam after marrying my wife, because we don't know which religion he was part of before that, but he becomes a Muslim after marrying his wife. So we know that. And he talks a lot about, how he was perceived in the city they came from. Basically, he talks at length about how hard it was to be an outsider, and how hard it was to be the other that everyone was looking at and everyone was like wary of after 9/11, especially to be a Muslim in the United States as in itself was very hard.
Yes.
And
yes.
It is still hard. We hear a lot of stories from Muslims that go to the United States and are searched throughout. They're searched thoroughly, while people get away with a lot of things Muslims don't. And I think it was Rahul Kohli, the actor himself. I follow him on Instagram and Twitter because he's a great persona, and I follow him. And I think it was 2 years ago or something, he says something about being stopped at the airport many times. And
Wow.
I was like, yeah, and it is so true to the story as well, because that was the experience of the sheriff as well. In your heart that happened to him as well. And being a cop doesn't stop it. Doesn't stop you from being the other, basically, in this story. And Aaron is also kind of the other, because she once and for all, she's a part of the community, of course, but also after meeting Riley, something changes in her. And something changes in her, and she starts questioning some things, and that cuts the ties between her and the community. After losing the baby, especially, her ties to the community is cut short, and she starts questioning, she starts researching, and spoiler alert, after Riley dies, and she's more pushed to the edge, to the margins, and she becomes this very weird part of herself. Like, she becomes something different than herself. And she becomes the kind of like the other in the story, and she becomes our lead in the story, along with the sheriff, of course. So three others, and they're all the main characters of the show. That's very beautiful to me to watch, and one of the reasons that I enjoyed so much this show, because like, you see a lot of shows that show of course, show of people who are worshipping like Islam or something,
Yeah.
but only on this show I felt that it was not exploited but explored. That this
Yeah.
is a very big difference. Like being exploited but
Yes.
being explored are two different things, and I think this show does not exploit but explore, but it explores. Definitely it explores, and it explores being the other as well in the form of three different characters, and also actually four, because the vampire is also another.
Oh, we're going
So
there now.
it is the other as well. Like, it's the ultimate other, isn't it? It is. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know anything. We don't know anything about this creature. We just
absolutely.
know that it's the opposite of everything you're supposed to be. So, so that makes it the ultimate other from the self. And yeah, there are a lot of things like you can look at the show and find a lot of bits and pieces where being the other is shown, especially in the looks of people. Those little glimpses where
Yeah,
that they're judging,
yeah,
and or that the way Beverly talks to the sheriff, that in her heart he's the other, and that he's being constantly being judged for it.
yes,
And yeah, Aaron too, definitely. I mean, everybody is being judged by Bev.
yes, yes,
Everybody. She's the character we all love to hate, and
yes.
boy, do I hate her. I hate her with a passion.
Yeah,
So
I know you do. Yeah, I think with Bev, she needs to be there because I mean you've said a couple of interesting things here. The
yeah,
fact that these others become themselves their own others, as you
yes,
said, when they transform into something else because of the experiences they go through, they become this other that or this other person they were not before. So there's this transformation as well. But also, I think what we have with Bev introducing here, it wasn't on the plan, but you're just making me think, introducing the shadow self. If in the shadow self, that Carl Jung talks about, and he says that the other, when we criticize someone else, thinking about Beth now, when we criticize someone else, is because we're criticizing our own faults. It's what the faults that we see in others is actually because we are seeing ourselves in them, and that reflection of the other is where you find your shadow self.
yeah,
So with Bev, we've got this rich character that is
we do.
perfect. Talk about a lot of the things, a lot of the Gothic elements kind of go at the end, go with her. So yes, it's interesting. But as others we have, and you just mentioned those, you've got also the dead. The dead are also the other, which you were
Yeah,
mentioning at the beginning, and we have different authors here. Obviously, we have the ghost, which is the traditional author,
yeah.
but then we have the vampire, as you mentioned before, or
Vampire.
angel. We don't know because I still have my doubts. I went back to the scene of when Paul is saying, and then there was the angel because he said the word angel, and there's this halo around this thing,
And
and
around this thing, I know, I
not
know.
talking. Where did you get that? He's saying angel, and he's putting their words in his mouth. It's like this duping,
Yeah,
and yeah, this other obviously is this one. But then we have the community as a ghost, and the other is also these seats that we were talking about at the beginning. And I don't know if it was episode 2 and 1 that the empty chair came up, and you elaborated further in on episode 3. But the empty chair is not just at the moment that we have the empty chair with Paul and with Riley, is also the empty seats in church before everybody actually gets there, and they become more and more addicted to the church because of the blood and because of the sermons and because of all these things. So it's interesting here how this other works as well.
Exactly. And well, of course, like I talked a little bit about Levinas, but from Levinas's perspective, he described the nature of the other as insomnia and wakefulness and ecstasy towards the other that forever remains beyond any attempt at fully capturing the other, whose otherness is infinite.
Wow.
Even in the murder of another, the otherness of the person remains uncontrolled and not negated. The infinity of the other allowed Levinas basically to derive other aspects of philosophy and science as a secondary to the ethic. So he talks a little bit about how, he says, what was his quote? His exact quote was, "My relationship with the other as neighbor gives meaning to my relations with all the others." So neighbor is something that we can find on Crooked Island, because everyone is a neighbor on Crooked Island, and they all go to the church as this community. So if like Levinas says, my relationship with the other as neighbor gives meaning to my relations with all the others, that means that the community, as a ghost, as the other, gives meaning to all my relationships with everybody. So because everyone is another from me, from my perspective, everyone is the other. So apart from the self, because they are apart from the self, they are not part of me. But also, community as a ghost is a beautiful thing to talk about, because it's a very Gothic thing as well. And as you said, we have a lot of Gothic elements. One of them is the ghost, obviously. Ghost haunting Riley from beyond the grave. And then there's the vampire. Vampire is also very Gothic, very Dracula. And you can see from the Gothic novel that a lot of elements of vampires and ghosts can be found. But community as a ghost is something that we should explore. Like, what is a ghost to you?
Yes, that's it. Well, it's actually something I've been exploring during this month of March. I've been exploring the figure of the ghost, and it's a very good question that nobody seems to be able to answer.
No one, because ghost is it's not a tangible thing. You can't completely describe what a ghost is, and it's different something different for everybody. I mean, to me, ghost is a remnant of something that has been but is no longer with us, like no longer. So ghost is something like that, something that has passed, but we can see the remnant of it. We can get kind of like reminiscence, and we remember it, and we talk about it maybe, and we keep it kind of alive, and not entirely, because it's a ghost. And so community as a ghost is especially on Crooked Island. A lot of islands are known to exist within their own means. So if they can no longer feed themselves through fishing or something else, whatever they are doing, farming, they can not exist. There's a scene in one of my favorite folk horror films, Doom Watch. It's a sci-fi horror film. And in it, people need to leave the island. They live on an island. And something is wrong with the environment. And there's an oil spill. And they need to leave the island. And one of them says, "You'll kill the island. You'll kill all of us." And another character from the outside says the island will die in a few years, because like there will be no one on the island and the community will be dead. And so Crooked Island is that kind of community. It's like
Yeah,
you see nobody working, really, not really,
that's true.
apart from the clergyman. Like you don't see anyone working, doing some kind of work. At least
Well,
everyone is just like chilling and going to the church. Like,
yeah,
what
we only
are you doing? What is it?
see the doctor and the sheriff, yes, so
Yeah,
we do some,
of course. They're
but
statespeople.
Ryan's dad is the only one that really we can see him fishing, or
Yeah, fishing.
but not quite at work. He's just preparing the nets and preparing things. So you're right, we
Exactly.
don't see like true full action. And what about the rest of the people in the community?
Yeah.
Yes,
What are they
it's
doing? Like you are really questioning like how are they? What are
so
they like? What are they
morning.
doing?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
They
maybe
kind of
this
this is
is
a
just yeah.
I
It's true
feel
because it's
like this is a kind of community that is dying slowly,
yeah,
and that the pastor had to do this to keep the community alive, because
yeah,
otherwise they would all be metaphorically dead within a few years. So he comes Paul just conjures up this idea that that they should all live forever as an island. So it's a metaphorical thing, of course, but it's also real life. We know that islands have it harder than
yeah.
the mainland most of the time, because their ties are cut from the mainland, and they don't have the same things that the mainland has, especially land and all that is fertile. And so it's a tough thing to be an islander, and it's a much tougher thing to be an islander on Crete Island. So
Yes,
basically, this community is slowly dying, and they're coming together, but also they are they're a shadow of what they once were. They're
yes,
not they're
yeah.
not
You see
sane.
yeah, they're not looking after it either, because they're not doing much. They're not really looking after it. It's all very much in decay. And yeah, you're
Yes,
right.
yes.
The school is there, so the kids are learning, but everything they're learning is very biblical. And Beth is in the school as well as a teacher.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I think
if Ben is teaching someone,
we've got Beth. There we go. So there's everybody else, and then it's Beth.
yeah, if in a community Bev is a teacher, you're in trouble.
Yeah, because look what
You're in
happens to
definite
you.
trouble.
Like,
Exactly. This is what happens to you. Look at that face. Oh my God.
it's just always
I
but this is so, what we say in Spanish is perpéntico, which is like these really shocking, uncanny view of contradictory items together. Which,
Exactly. Religious clothing with, blood on it. Religious white clothing. White.
yes,
White is a very important color, because it's the color of usually that is associated with innocence and all things pure, and
yeah,
not is all things good as well. It's not associated with evil. So you're seeing Bev in white, you're seeing the vampire in white, and of course there are all like blood everywhere. Vampire it was in a robe as well, and of
yeah.
course it is also bloodshed. And now Bev is also covered in blood,
It's
and
almost like
these are all very important
sorry.
cinematography as well.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very
I'm just
important cinematography.
yeah, it is, yes. And look at the colors and everything and visually. I'm just thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna say something really out of place, but it's almost like with the act of what she does here in the final scenes, this is
Mhm.
like saying, I've just lost my virginity.
Yes, yes, she loses her she loses her V card.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
like
Beverly, bye.
and almost like her face there. It's like you almost feel sorry for her because it's like, what have
Yeah.
I done? All this time being such a good girl, and look at me, I've lost
Look at
it.
me. I could have had so much fun. Yeah, it's the look of realization, I call it. It's the
Yeah,
look of like, I could have done this a lot sooner. Like, why did I wait so long?
what have I done? Is the wrong one late and the wrong one? But yeah,
Oh my God.
what
What
it
a
means,
realization.
blood and things, the meanings that we give to blood, and these change
Yeah.
of obviously the transition because of being beaten and being transformed into this thing as well. There's a transition there. So this is like the battle remains. And yeah, but that's it. Beth is like another animal on its own, isn't she? She's like this
Yeah.
other thing. So I think from now we've already been stepping into the supernatural part, but we can both define or try to define what monster is, because we get into this moment, don't we, of we're talking about
Yeah.
a lot of monsters, and these others are, some of them are real monsters. And you were saying last week we talked together because you've been so busy that it wasn't last week actually. There has
It was, yeah. Last episode.
Oh dear. You were saying many times, who's the real monster? And you kept asking that question. I was like, just wait. We'll get to that in another session. Because now you can elaborate these further. So who is for you the real monster? Do you think there's more than one monster? And how do
What
they
a
perform? I mean, you did mention that. And we have here Derrida's influence. Um,
Yeah.
maybe with a little etymological definition to start you off. The Oxford Dictionary says that from the Latin monstrum, which means something marvelous or prodigious, which is nice, even a divine portent, maybe this is what Bev sees in the angel, or Sarah Martin Alegre, who's also a teacher at University of Barcelona in the UB, she has a book called Monstruos al final del milenio, Monsters at the end of the millennium. And
Hmm.
she uses the Latin word monstrare instead of monstrum. And monstrare means to refer to the Roman divinatory methods, which used bodies malformations as a kind of message that could only be decoded by experts. So we have two different um, interpretations of the word monster. If it means monstrum, as in something marvelous and prodigious, and also monstrare, that is like the divinatory methods of to show something. Yeah, in Spanish, mostrar is to show something. So we have this idea of what the dictionary says, and then how the term has evolved. And
Hmm.
there's also this metaphor of the monster in this other book that is actually a little bit expensive, so people donate because then you get supported to buy more books. There's like this quote that says that monsters threaten binary thinking by introducing a new category that refuses easy classification. So that's being quoted by Spiral 27. Monsters are denizens of the borderland who have always represented the extremities of transgression. You've just been talking about this, and the limit of the order of things. And then he continues the boundaries of conventional thought. This is said by Colin Milburn. There are different speakers and writers in this book. Then these monstrosities are really a question of how we perceive ourselves, which is what you've been talking about as well, like when we talked about the otherness and our own perceptions and our relationship to both the human and the cosmic other. I love that. The cosmic other. That made me think of the angel vampire thing. So the monsters is that which cannot be understood according to conventional notions of identity. We have identity again. And it is an aberration, yeah, the angel again, which in its very existence destabilizes epistemological boundaries and challenges the possibility of identity. So it could be the monster, it could be Beth, maybe their siblings. I don't know. It's just like maybe they were plotting before the film. So yeah, there are all these references to monsters, but I'm sure that you've got your own sources just to complement all these definitions and how we see that in the series.
Of course. I mean, monsters threaten binary thinking by introducing a new category that refuses easy classification. That's a very telling quote, because there is a, of course, it's changing now, but there was once a binary uh, system of things. Now we are slowly, as a society, we are breaking it and deconstructing it. But once there was a binary system of things, differentiating between things. But and monsters are a whole new category, and it destroys the classification altogether, to
Right.
me. And of course, Derrida talks a lot about monsters, and well, he points to the resistance of monsters towards all language and classification. He's one of the first people who talks about, how monsters defy classification, and it's very hard to defy a monster. And to the very question of whether monsters could have a place in their own right within the discourse, and thus within the society as well. But of course, he has a quote as well. His quote goes, "Monsters cannot be announced. One cannot say, here are our monsters, without immediately turning the monsters into pets." And that's
Oh,
very important. Yes,
sure.
exactly. So you turn the monster into a pet, and what is a pet? Then something that you have control over. And of course, there are a lot of examples to monsters within the literary criticism, and also on film and television as well. But one of the monsters that we generally talk about is the ultimate monster, Frankenstein, that
Yeah.
I love. Saying hi to Mary Shelley from over here to the other side. And I hope she's listening. I hope there is an afterlife and she's listening, and she would be pleased that someone is talking about her. But like, everyone is talking about her these days.
Yes,
She's a
so
very,
true.
very important person, and she's an important person in creating monsters as well.
Yeah.
That there she builds, constructs a monster from different parts of human body, and she creates the ultimate other in that sense as well. He's not alive, he's not dead. What is he? He's not human. Is he a monster? Who is the monster in the story? I mean, there are a
Yeah.
lot of things that we can look at Frankenstein as well in that sense.
Yeah.
And well, monstrosity is really, as there is a quote here, is how we perceive ourselves, and our relationship to the human and the cosmic other. Like, what is the cosmic other? Of course, there's a, if we believe in the supernatural, if we believe in the religious, so there needs to be a cosmic equivalent of the self.
Yeah.
So call it soul, call it something angel, call it something else, call it God. So there needs to be something if you're believing in it.
Yeah.
And well, in this show, what we are questioning is the monstrosity of the monster. If you're talking about the vampire, if you're looking at the vampire as a monster, then we can ask the question, like, is he really a monster? Is it really a monster? It's not a he. We don't know what kind of pronouns here he, she, or it is using.
That's
We do
not
not
bad. Yeah.
know anything about this creature. We don't know anything about this creature at all. And if you're calling him the monster of the story, it's very hard to say that, because how
Yeah.
can this creature be the villain if we do not know anything about it? Like,
That's so
how can
true.
it be the monster? And but we have a little bit of monstrosity in Beverly, for example. she's in her human form, but throughout the story, she's the villain, and she's a monstrous figure to me,
Yes.
because she's using her power, you know, the she's using power in her game, and for other people's losses, of course. And she's using her authority over other people in a monstrous way. But basically, she's covering up murders left and right,
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
no one is asking her to do that. No one is asking her. She just takes charge and says that they're covering up murders, and basically goes against everybody who is opposed to her. She's a kind of like a fascist leader, and in the community, and to me, she's the monster of the story, to be honest. I'm not seeing the vampire as the villain and the monster. I think in this regard, the human is the monster of the story. And if we
Yeah.
are going as far as that, if we are going as far as that, this other that Paul stole from the Middle East cannot be. It can be the other, but if you're seeing it as a monster, it's a very Orientalist kind of view. So Paul steals this monster, quote unquote, from the Middle East, and brings it to Crooked Island. Like, who's the monster now?
That's so
Like,
true.
you did
Kidnap,
this.
right?
You did this. Yes, Paul is the monster in that sense as well. He kidnaps this creature against his will. Probably, we don't know anything about that part of the story. We don't know if it came with his own will. With his own will, we don't know anything.
We're
So
not told. We're not told. And looking back at that moment when Paul in the cave meets the angel, um,
yeah,
it's for me this creature that we still don't know if he communicates or not, which I think communication is also super important in anything, but in the series is what defines certain characters there. How I'm still asking this since the last time. How does the monster, the angel, communicate with Paul? As you were saying, is it mutual consent? This is like, do they have this telepathic communication? Is that starts communicating? So then we go back to this trope of the vampire doing telepathy things, telepathic communication, but
yeah.
also at what
But we
point?
don't hear it. We don't hear it in
No,
this one.
no, we don't. But then is the moment that there's like some kind of the train of thought of this thing when he's biting Paul, that all of a sudden he decides to open his wrist to feed him. There's
Yeah,
some purpose there. There's an intention. What's that? They're kind of using each other for something,
yeah, they are.
or it's not clear. So if he's trying to colonize and make more vampires, nobody he's beaten has grown wings, like him, for example.
Yeah,
They,
like
they
him.
turn,
Like
you
him.
know, there are a lot of questions there that come down also to this communication side of things. And I suppose we could refer to Lacan in that case when it talks about communicating in language and how we express all these things that we're talking about. But yeah, it's true. He kidnaps this creature, whether it's consensual or not. And by doing that, it's already breaking some rules and kind of playing with the cosmic balance, going back to this
Yeah.
celestial
And
order of.
turning the monster into a pet, which
Yes,
is something you should not do.
so true.
But yeah, that Derrida was right in that case, that we can't talk about a monster without turning it into a pet.
Yeah.
And now Paul takes that monster, if you are calling it that, takes that monster and turns it into a pet, and takes it to the Crocodile Island, where, you know, everybody is happily doing nothing, not working. Certainly, apart from a few people, they're not even working. It's just a small happy community. We don't know what they're eating. Stones, maybe. Yes, it can happen. I mean, yeah, this is a very interesting community. I mean, I'm sure that even the vampire was shocked. Like, what are they doing all this time on the islands? They don't.
Yeah, and then they
They
can
just.
get
They
on with
just.
each other like that.
They just travel around with their lanterns and, you know, with their candles. Like,
I
what?
mean,
What is that? What is this place? It's a folk
yeah,
horror. Folk
we have
horror,
this,
definitely.
this ghost, yeah, these communities of ghosts that you were talking about before. We have this whole body made out
Vigil
of like
kind
a
of thing.
multiple, yeah, multiplicity, a body with multiple people, multiple beings there, and the moments where they actually feel close to each other is at moments that are really scary because Erin knows what's happening here. She knows what she's going
Yeah.
to be witnessing, but these people are oblivious. Apart from the mom, I mean, because Sarah's mom here, that come on, everybody, this woman was dying. Are you not a little bit suspicious? Are we silly? But this is how, again, it's just showing that the community is just blind and it's their option, it's their own. Yeah, it's their own option to be blind. Nobody's forcing them to be that blind. They just
Of course.
choose to be blind. And again, the contrast here with the light and the blindness that they carry, these dark and light and shadows of the Gothic appears again, not just visually, but also in what it
Yeah.
means, what they're going to be doing. This is something sacred, and they're going to be massacred in this place.
Yes.
So it's the community as I go that you mentioned before. Derrida also talks about hauntology, which I think is very, very good. These for what we're talking about. He says
Mm.
to haunt does not mean to be present, which is also going back to the ghost. And it is necessary to introduce haunting into the very construction of a concept, of every concept, beginning with the concept of being and time. That is what we will be calling here a hauntology. Ontology opposes it only in a movement of exorcism. And we've got here some keywords. And ontology is a conjuration. I mean, we've got some mind-blowing vocabulary here from the supernatural as well. We've got
Yeah.
exorcism, conjuration. We've got, well, they were to haunt and it's turned into this hauntology. You were saying, what is for me a ghost? And precisely, ghosts are not just the ghost that we think in the traditional way of a medium seeing a ghost, but also the past haunting us and what we've done that keep coming and haunting us. So we have precisely the ghost of the girl that is killed right at the beginning. That's exactly what she's doing. But then people's actions also become these hauntology and these haunting things to, people haunting other people with their actions, and the actions being the haunting, if you want, the tool to be haunting the other people. So I don't know if I'm making myself I'm getting a bit into a twist
Yeah,
here.
you're making you're making sense. Yeah, I know. I know. Derrida was talking about a certain event. Actually, he was talking about what Marx said in Spectres of Marx in his book. He talks about, what Marx says. Marx says that a spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism.
Mhm.
And Derrida takes that and says, basically says that time is out of joint, and begins this entire scientific, what can we say, scientific way of explaining things, such as, death, for example, And he writes in his book, like Spectres of Marx, he talks about, death of communism after the 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union,
Yep.
and a lot of other things that that weren't being talked about during his time. But he says, as you quoted here, that ontology opposes it only in a moment of exorcism.
Mhm.
Ontology is a conjuration. And what is a conjuring?
Mm.
It's definitely interested in the supernatural. Of course, specters are also something supernatural, an element of supernatural, and conjuring something, exorcism. These are
Yeah.
all related to the supernatural order of things. And it's important, like Derrida talks about this, because no one else does. And apart from really, really, few scholars, no one still,
Mm.
like that. Not a lot of people talk about it. Not a lot of people talk about haunting, and not a lot of people talk about death. And even in the sense of, death of communism,
Mhm.
people don't. We talked about this before, but I'll say it again. People don't like to talk about the death of
Yeah.
anything.
People even in the academic space, they not making much this connection of
Exactly.
dead things, or even politics, talking about things dying and being reborn again, or even just death in itself. That there's this lack of talking about it. Yes, and we keep bringing this up because for us it is important, and
Yeah.
it's important because of what is going on around the world nowadays as well, that we are surrounded by death, no matter where
Yeah.
you look. And the globalization, maybe
Yeah.
these
That's true.
these death of the old times, our old ways, which is in a way was happening in this series, the dying old times, uh, also go away, without, not quietly, when something gets destroyed and to be reborn again, even like the phoenix thing, you call it the ave phoenix. In a way is like, okay, we need to look into, for this new era to be reborn, we need to kill the old one. And the only thing is that in the series is done in such a catastrophic way, because it's almost like
Yeah.
there's no hope for them, which is what you were mentioning before. It's an island that is bound to disappear, and he's going to do it with a bang, and he does it with a bang, literally, almost, because it gets set on fire, everybody gets turned, everybody's a it's a vampire, and some of them are dead because they can't control
Yeah.
themselves, they can't even embrace their new ways because it's too much for them, and they become these zombies, and we don't even have a vampire anymore. We have these compulsive killers, and eaters, blood eaters. They're not like Paul. Paul is being converted nicely and intelligently into a vampire, but or a bloodsucker, not even a vampire, because it just drinks blood. But there's no fangs, there's no wings, there's no cape,
Definitely. Where
there's no.
all the cool things are gone from being a vampire. I mean, did I get from this? What do I
But
get from this?
it gets younger. Come on, it gets
Yeah,
younger.
you get younger. That's true. You get younger, but apart from that, all the cool stuff is gone. I mean,
Yes,
come on. I
yes.
want all the cool stuff of the vampire. But speaking of ghosts, I think it was Buse and Scott that said ghosts come from the past. I think, what was the quote? Let me find it. Yeah, it is, ghosts arrive from the past and appear in the present. However, the ghost cannot be properly said to belong to the past.
Mm.
So, because it is something that arrives from the past, you would assume that it belongs in the past, but no, because it appears in the present. So it's a
Yes.
kind of like a paradoxical kind of existence that a ghost has, or non-existence, or
Yeah.
whatever you may call it. And ghosts are something that is, that is not alive, certainly, but we see a glimpse of it. So it's just kind of in this world,
Hmm.
and it is on the margins of what is, alive and what is death, and it's walking that line that is called death.
Yeah.
And the reason that so many scholars don't like to talk about death is that people don't like to talk about things they know nothing about, because
No.
anyone who experienced it is not alive to talk about it. So we don't like to talk about things that we don't know anything about, and it's a very human thing. It's a very understandable thing as well, that it scares
Yeah.
us. It scares
Yeah.
us. I mean, we don't
Yeah.
we don't
Also
know.
because you might be treated as a mad person, who I have a friend who's a medium, and
Hmm.
she's having throughout her life a hard time to actually make herself respectable and for people to respect what she does and what she can have. For me, it's such a respectful thing because she's got an
Yeah,
ability that I don't have, but that has isolated her from a lot of people, even the people who come closer to her. At some point she cuts them off. I mean, she's cut me off as well because the interpretation of things, and sometimes you think, what has she seen to cut me
yeah.
off?
What has
Yeah.
she seen? What
am,
have I done?
am I
What will
have
I do?
exactly, so the paranoia is also there, but
Yeah,
it's
of
true that
course.
there are people out there that have abilities that the rest of us do not have or we haven't developed. But the fact that we don't see things doesn't mean they don't exist and they're not
It
there.
doesn't mean, of course, it doesn't
So
mean
I mean,
that.
we kind of going off a tangent a bit now, but the fact that Riley sees this ghost, he can't tell people that he sees her. So the fact that he's keeping that thought on that vision for himself, you can interpret that as his unconscious, that he's really seeing the ghost. Why are we going to try to find another explanation? Maybe it's just he's seeing the ghost, like a lot of people do. And the fact that he can't tell anybody else makes things worse, because why is he not telling people? Because it looks like a really um, maybe because of the alcohol they might think he's too lolly, but also because he strikes me of being someone with a strong way of thinking, very reasonable. So maybe
Yeah,
even to himself recognizing that he can see a ghost makes him look like a fool or like a madman.
madman.
So there are lots
Yeah,
of things
definitely.
that
But
implicate me.
remember, he's already the other, so he
Yeah,
doesn't want to be the other further than that.
yeah.
And what is more
So
other than a madman? So
yeah, yeah. I forgot to share another quote talking about this as well with
mhm,
ontology and to extend what we're talking about. There's this guy called Jacob W. Glacier. He's from the Department of Psychology in the University of West Georgia in the
mhm,
USA. And he says on the same idea of ontology, says that by invoking the trope of the ghost, ontology helps to demonstrate how there still lingers in the absence of a thing, a spectral element that is more real than its corporeal counterpart, that has as many effects or more than things considered to be real, which is what we're talking about now. And then he continues, I will argue that ontology, following Derrida elsewhere, invokes the category of messianicity. Now we get into Bev again and Paul, as opposed to messianism. Interesting, linguistically, this is for me really amazing as well, how things
mhm.
can change. The
Yes,
former being a particular temporal waiting wheels, the latter is more universal anticipation, and messianism empty of content. And I think we have here Paul and Beth, and probably more Beth than not Paul. And what do you think? And do you think that we have kind of pinned down a bit better what Beth is all about?
Yeah, we did. I mean, Bev is definitely what is, as I said before, like, well, she's also the monster,
Mm-hmm.
and in this sense, she is like this, the former, the messianicity, right?
Yeah,
And
Messianism and Messianism, they're very, very similar.
Messianism, they are very similar, but apart from one another. And the latter is more universal in that sense, and the former is a particular temporal weighting. And in this sense, I think we do have a little bit of what Bev is all about. And she sees something in Paul when she's in the hut, and when she realizes that it is their very beloved Monseigneur, and she realizes that this is something, you know, like a Messiah related, something that she sees as a religious miracle,
Yeah.
and she sees Paul as a Messiah as well. And all the things that they're doing, all the things that Bev is doing, is because of what she believes what Paul is. It's nothing about what Paul says Paul is. Like, Paul doesn't say, I'm a Messiah,
No.
come after me. He doesn't say that. Not anywhere, because it is not about this for him. I mean, when you go to the end of the show, you realize that Paul only did this to be with his real family, and that was the doctor and her mother. And Paul doesn't have any claim to, messianism. I don't think that he has, but Beverly has. And
Yes.
Beverly certainly will make a Messiah out of Paul. And if he's not willing to be the Messiah, then she will be the Messiah. And she's
Yeah.
she's just that determined to create something, religious, and create something miraculous from anywhere, from her, mostly her, because she's also, I think, she's a big narcissist.
Yes.
And because of that, I think that she creates this persona over religion, that she thinks what religion is. Of course, it's all about what she thinks is religion is, and nothing about it has nothing to do with the real religion at all. She just keeps quoting things from the Bible, but it's like really old quotes, like really old scripture that she keeps talking about that no one else knows. She just blurs them
Yeah.
out and
But she's
quotes them
memorized it
all around.
right. Yeah, she's got
Yes,
all this
yes.
memorized.
She
You're right. Like
memorized. She has all of those things memorized in her mind, and
an obsession.
just
Yeah,
as
it's an obsession.
you know just after being a vampire, just as she's about to declare herself as the Messiah, the what happens? She dies.
Yeah.
And yes, thankfully she dies.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I feel sorry for her at the end a little bit because it's like everything she's worked for so hard, and all of a sudden that's like just
Yeah,
to
it
go
just
like that,
crumbles down.
Yeah, but she's still holding on there, like she wants to bury herself in the sand to actually
Yeah.
not disappear, so she knows what's happening. But yeah, it's this obsessive quoting of the Bible, as you said, that makes you think, yeah, she's narcissistic. So we should probably include here the death drive that Freud talked about and the still people talking about. That would
Yeah.
be another long session because the death drive people write books about this. And
Yeah, of course.
is probably very connected. Yes, the fact of death and life and the other, and this narcissistic profile that she's got, that she doesn't really love anybody, but she manipulates everybody. So yeah,
She
it's
loves herself a
that's
lot.
so yeah. So it's like, well, she's a very good character to pull out a lot of the strings. But going back to communication, language, Lacan, I think it's interesting to see when we are in the supernatural space who talks and who doesn't talk,
Hmm.
because communication is not just spoken, but in this case, what we have here, the selection I've done is for non-spoken communication. So we have that all time the ghost talks visually with her presence to Riley. And it's beautiful how at the end she kind of look in the picture, she's like even reaching with a hand, like making peace with Riley. So they never talk, but in the end there's peace. So this lack
Yeah.
of communication, verbal communication, it doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of communication there. It's visual, and
Mhm.
it's a happy ending for Riley for sure, and also for the ghost. The
Yes,
fact
that's true.
that we have the creepy creature here with the halo, look, he's got a halo on his head. That's how Paul sees him. It could be the lights
Yes,
of
that's
the
true.
cave, it could be his own imagination because he's like the last minute there. But he doesn't talk. We mentioned that before. He doesn't really talk, or does he? We'll never know. Another picture that I chose
We have
here,
no idea.
exactly, we don't have a clue, no? The other picture of someone who's missing ghostly is the baby, and we've talked about this in other episodes as well. The baby never talks. He or it or she thinks it's a she. So the baby never has a say. The only moment that there's something regarding the baby or the talks is what she interprets, that death will give this voice to her child, and then you can start imagining what this baby would be age 6 7 and be looked after other beings in heaven. But she doesn't get a say either. So these characters, they do not speak, and they're so powerful in the series. And as I said before, the empty chairs in church, don't they, the fact that all these missing people, that's also information that is non-oral communication, but still information and communication of our form by people not being there. They're already saying, well, I do not believe, I don't want to be there, I'm not bothered, or you're not engaging, or whatever. You have nothing interesting to tell me for me to be here. So this lack of faith, which is also something that happens in a lot of religions, that people start non-believing. And I suppose for a society, depending on the society, it's a scary thing. If people do not believe, you cannot manipulate them anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is about who talks and who doesn't talk. And I suppose we've talked about this. It's a bit of a summary, if you want. But yeah, I think this moment, this is what I want you to maybe talk more about, because it's your space as well. It's the death moment. In this case, communication goes on for a long time, because
Yeah,
you're
it
really
does.
doing what people have forgotten to do, which is to talk about your feelings,
Your
and how
feelings,
this
exactly.
is so key. Yeah, and then these two characters, they find support on each other, and how necessary that long conversation was. And this is precisely what a lot of people were criticizing. Oh, the long conversations. Well, that they are so valuable to some of us, because I think society has forgotten how to have these long conversations.
Yeah,
And
that's why it bothers them, because they have forgotten how it was to talk so long to somebody about something deep and personal. Because we are in the age of social media. We are in the age of TikTok, where all you do is dance to silly songs, and we're on the age of Twitter, where into it's like 240 now. It's 240 words or something, and you're talking about that in a few words. Basically, you're talking about you're trying to talk about something in a few words that were given to you in that time. And we are in a society where everybody is like, you say something and after that they're like, oh yeah, same, likewise. Everybody is saying that in every language. Basically everyone is just ready to, close the communication gates and, do their own thing, which whatever it is. So as you know, I'm a communication scholar at first. I mean, before being a film scholar. So communication,
Yeah.
of course, is a big field. I mean, we're talking about something that started as something like a message. If you look at the models of Shannon and Weaver, it starts as a message that is brought to the from the sender to the receiver. It's a
Mm-hmm.
message, and there are a lot of things that can be lost in between. And of course, there is the mass communication, which is something that is mediated by the media and the medium, such as television and cinema, and as we can see, streaming platforms. And of course, there is also the interpersonal communication, which this is all about. And what is interpersonal relationship? We call it, face-to-face relationship as well, face-to-face communication as well, between one person and another or others. And it can be both verbal and non-verbal, and it can be body language, and it can play a big part in how one person understands another. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, that with that comes emotions as well. Emotions is a very interior thing. It's about the psychology of one person. It's about all the chemical things that happen in our brain. So it's very internal in that regard. But of course, to express this, to put this outside of our body, to put those emotions outside our body, we have to use something. It can be anything. It can be body language, it can be sign language, it can be no language in any shape or form. And or it can be long conversations about death and how we can move on, if we can move on. And this scene between Riley and Aaron is of course important. And I loved all the long conversations because I love long conversations. I love reading Tolstoy, I love reading Dostoevsky, and people like who are writing like this. So
Really
it's no
non-sensitive.
problem. It's no problem for me to listen to a 10-minute conversation between two people, because what is it like? I'm asking the people, like, when they're saying, oh, the conversations were long, like, are you not speaking to your friends like ever?
That's
Like,
true.
what are you doing? Like, if 10 minutes is bothering you, like, what is wrong with you? Like, are you not human? Are you a robot? Are you Elon Musk? Like, what is going on? So
A new
because
category.
because we as the people, we communicate. And not even we, animals. You've just seen my dog. He was barking outside because he was communicating his feelings to the other dogs or whatever he was talking to.
He was
But
talking to
he
death.
was,
He was talking to death. Remember?
yes, maybe he was talking to death. We don't know. Maybe he was talking to us and we just didn't get it. So it's that thing. That thing about the communication is that it needs to be two-sided. If it's interpersonal, it needs to be two-sided. We need to be able to understand what the other is saying. So if you look at it in the scene, Aaron and Riley understand each other completely and perfectly, and that's what they needed to put an end
Hmm.
to to all their trauma and all their feelings needed to be open in the air so they could share it. And in a short while Riley will be dead.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like almost not completely, but this is almost the final conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is very
Yeah.
important. It is very important that it is about death, and how how we are able to move on, or if we are able to move on from it at all. And other things, such as we talked about before, that in the previous slide, there was the vampire. The vampire doesn't speak in our sense of
Mm,
communication, but
mm,
maybe not maybe, it has to be, it needs to be, because it needs to say something, telepathically to Paul, because Paul is answering out
yes.
outwardly.
True.
So he's like, no, give me some time, or something like that. He talks a little bit to what he thinks he's talking to. And in that regard, we understand that he's actually speaking to somebody,
That's
and
true.
somebody is answering back. So
Mm,
we just don't see the communication as in the way that we know it
yeah.
as a language. And but in the church, for example, they're all together, like saying the words. It's another form of communication.
Yeah.
And if we go to the family, and the family talks amongst themselves, it's a familiar kind of communication.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are people that you don't even need to say words to. They just
Yeah.
know, they just understand empathically,
Yeah.
and they just know you so well that they know how you feel. And they just know that they are needed by you. So it, communication, as I said, can be in many, many forms. And
Yeah.
it can also be beautiful, such as this, that we can
Yeah.
see. To me, it was
They, they,
beautiful.
they found like a closure, as you said, is the preliminaries of what's
Mhm.
going to happen to him. That you were
Him.
thinking that at some point they were going to find balance and happiness with each other after this conversation, and everything goes, you know, I was going to say something a bit rude, but no, it
Yeah,
goes
the moment the
legs in the
moment
air.
I heard this conversation, I was like, oh my god, some of them is going to die. Like one of
Yeah,
them is going to die,
it's
certainly,
a
because
bad omen.
this
Mm,
is a final speech. This feels like a
yeah,
final speech. Because what
but it's
can what can be said after this? Like
yeah, that's true.
what else?
That's true. They found peace in talking about their ideas of death, and I think this is very beautiful. If we could have time to analyze this speech at some point as well, maybe for another day or for our private sessions with people if they want to come and talk about the speech. They find that he's more scientifically oriented, and Erin is more in the spiritual side, so they complement each other.
Yeah.
So they can have this conversation where they see things in a different light, and yet they are understanding each other. And this is what society is all about, really, in this
Communication.
micro world that they've created. And this moment is what the community is actually missing, because when you are in church, there's only one way direction. You're listening, but you're not saying what you want to say or you're thinking. It's just the priest or the curate there saying his stuff or her stuff. So yeah, I think the communication side could be something that if people would like to talk about more in depth, we could play videos and stuff. The moment to do that is to do it in a different session where we could all be privately talking about it. So that could be a nugget for or carrot for people if they wanted to. So this is yeah, it's so important for our times as well, I think, to think about that. So yeah, supporters,
Yeah,
supporters, because we
supporters.
are them. And Yes, we've got to support all the place. So yes, I think we pretty much covered everything we could cover. I mean, we could extend on the little conversations and expand on that, and we could keep elaborating on different monsters and figures in the supernatural. But maybe this is something for another day, and maybe we
Yeah.
could close midnight mass with this. But yeah, people support that way. That I can get behind
That
that.
way.
That
That
way.
way. That way.
Support the supporters.
Support us, people, please.
Yes, because I mean, you're worth it. I mean, maybe I'm not as worth it as you are because you bring a lot
Uh,
of information here. But
Come
yeah,
on.
it's
You bring in the
fantastic.
goods. You bring in the beautiful slides and the goods.
I mean, the slides. Yeah, thank God for Canva because it makes it really
Yeah.
good.
And the Gothic. You bring in the Gothic.
And the Gothic. And so please, people, follow Tugce. She's awesome.
Yes.
She's great. As you can see, we're having a lot of fun. I know that a lot of people are shy and they're not commenting on things, but they're enjoying it. So that's good. But we like to know, we need to know to keep producing content. And this is me all over the show, as you know. I will leave all links and anything I can think of. I will leave it at the bottom of the page in the description on YouTube. And if you're listening in the podcast, all the details are there as well. So this is it, my friends. Oh, we come to an end. How sad.
I'm
How do you
sad.
feel about the whole thing? I know that maybe you might have had all the things ready there and prepared, and maybe you feel like, oh my god, we could still go on for another 3 or 4 sessions. But to wrap up for you, Midnight Mass, what have you rediscovered by talking about it? What lessons can we take with us? And watching series is not just entertainment. At the end of the day, we're doing a lot more than that. We're learning. So for you,
Yeah.
what has been the whole experience, and what is the message for our audience? What will you tell them?
Well, Midnight Mass for me, beginning that I thought it was just going to be a story about a town and that it would revolve around the town, only
Mm,
that. But looking at the show, I found something fascinating, a study in death and afterlife, or non existence afterlife, which is immortality. And I found something about human emotion. I found something about grief. I found, of course, I see grief everywhere. I mean, it's my
uh,
it's my
yeah,
obsession. I see grief everywhere, but there's grief. I mean, what can I do? There's grief. Where there is life, there's grief, guys. So, and in the sense that, as you know, 2 months ago I lost my grandmother, and last week I lost my uncle as well.
oh no,
And
oh
real life moves on. I mean, yes,
yeah,
these people that we love and know, they're passing away, but also their memories stay with us. And this story is also about that. This narrative of Midnight Mass is about how people can pass along to the other side and still be there. There can be remnants of them, and we
yeah,
can remember them by. And of course it's also about the community, being a community and trying to survive in this mad world where economy is everything basically. But and it's about communication, you know two people having long and deep and philosophical conversations with one another.
yeah.
And I think the entire story is about death and also about life.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about it made me realize more and more, and that how it can be, ripped apart, and you can see a lot of things in it. You
Yeah,
can find you can find the supernatural, you can find the Gothic. I mean, if you look long enough, you can see a lot of things in a lot of TV shows and a
yeah,
lot of films. And that's why I love my scholarship, because it's fun. You
Yeah,
can
you can
see,
go.
you can find a lot of things. And a lot of people ask me like, do you enjoy watching films? And I'm like, why wouldn't I? Oh,
Sort of
because it's
question
a
is that.
job. Because it's a job. No, for you it's a job. For me, it's a life. And
It's
I'm doing,
enjoyment. It's a
yes,
passion.
it's my passion, and I'm one of the few people who are lucky enough to have their passion as their living. So yes, I do enjoy watching films and TV shows still, and because it is more, I think it becomes even more enjoyable because I understand it. I
Exactly.
understand what it
Hmm.
means.
Maybe
So
that's the key that a lot of people do not actually have that, don't do the exercise of going in depth into what they've got in front of them. And I get that too. You know, it's amazing. I read articles, you know, I write on Medium, I write articles almost every week on Medium. And, you know, you come across a lot of different articles from the Gothic space is a small community, and I'm kind of bringing some light into it together with other people there. But the main thing that you hear is productivity, productivity, productivity. And why would you watch TV at night? That you're wasting your time. And I think, well, I'm watching all these programs that I use to talk to people like Tugce, that I'm learning tons of things. I'm helping other people to learn tons of things if they want to. We helping people to be aware, creating this awareness, creating this critical thinking through a passion that is watching things on TV and reading books. Piles of books, my friends, piles of books. So all that hasn't got a price, and the value that we get is amazing because you are in contact also with other people, you're having conversations with other people, so you're exchanging opinions. Therefore there's another, again, there's learning. So yeah, I think you're right. In every space nowadays, in every job, it's like, why, what would you be wanting to watch TV or read articles? But books take a long time. What nonsense is all this? It all depends how you use
yeah,
things, isn't it? So if you just are there watching the pink press and you're just watching soap operas that don't bring much, then, well, they're good distractors and you can also learn from them. But you need to make the effort of what is it that you're learning. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we need to, we're lucky that we can be in spaces that we love, that there are a lot of lessons to be learned and to be taught. And you know, if anybody is landing here today and is enjoying this, we've done our job as well. So
yeah.
there you go. So people support us because we're worth it.
Yes, you heard it.
You've heard it again, and now I'm gonna have to put these others like, who is the real monster now? The money monster. No, thank you.
The money monster.
Thank you very much, Tucci. I think we could be another hour here talking. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm really looking forward to plotting more
Likewise.
things in the near future. We need to think about how we're going to get these exclusive to people that really, really are enjoying it, because I think they're
Yeah, of
worth it.
course.
And yeah, thanks a lot. And again, let's put this thing to finalize the screen. I just love my logo. I just narcissistic
Yes.
I have.
Beautiful logo. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
The tree of life.
That's right. Trees. I've got this passion with trees. Trees are like people. People are like trees. It's so creepy altogether. So
So,
anyway,
yes.
thank you very much. And
Thank
speak to
you
you
for
very
having me.
soon. It's always great. And people write to her, get in contact, and get in touch, because she will always answer. You're just great. You know, you talk to anytime I
Yes.
have a question, I know you're there, and you're always in good humor and always in good spirits. And it's difficult to find people like that nowadays. So I'm really
Yeah,
grateful
that's
that
true.
you're not creepy.
Unfortunately.
You like death, but you're not creepy. So that's good. Okay,
Uh,
okay. So thank you, and see you very soon. And we'll have to keep plotting. More things to
Yeah, we need to do that. Yes. Maybe a new thing, new show, new film, whatever. We can talk about that. Yeah. Let's think about that.
Think about it. Think about it. Great. So speak to you very soon, and
Speak to you soon.
bye.
Bye.